Now, hi, I'm George Thomas with the Akron Beacon Journal. I'm joined by Nate Ulrich to the upper right, Steve Doerschuk to the lower right, and Marla Ridenour to the lower left. And we have another Browns victory to talk about. Again, it wasn't pretty. Actually, it was kind of ugly. And starting off, was there any way to expect anything other than an ugly game given the obstacles this team went through this week, or no?
Here's the thing. I think it's fair to expect that because, this is the first time the Browns have been without their two best defensive players, their best overall player, Myles Garrett, and then the best cornerback, best secondary player, Denzel Ward. So, I thought that it could be a weird game. Mike Glennon playing for the first time since, as a starter since 2017. You just kind of never know when there's a little bit of a quarterback change. You got a team that's only won one game, obviously hungry for a little bit more than that. And I don't know. I just thought it could be a weird game. I thought Joe Schobert could make a play against the Browns because that would just be fitting for Joe Schobert and the Browns, and it happened. But what I did expect was a better showing from the offense. They kind of got out of that bad weather trilogy in Cleveland and had a shot in warm Jacksonville to kind of get that passing game going again. And we saw the number one thing that we've seen from Baker Mayfield this season, and that's inconsistency.
To me, the most troubling part of that inconsistency is missing guys in the end zone. It happened twice in the first quarter last week against the Eagles. He does it again with, Rashard Higgins, his guy. It was like he had time to wave his arms and say, it was just mind-boggling how he threw that one over his head. And the one to Hunt there, at the end was also huge. So, I just, I wondered in my column, and I still wonder, how can you give a guy like this $25 million, into his fifth-year option? So, I still think he's got to clean it up. He really does. I feel like the pressure is on Baker, and maybe it is anyway, considering they're in the playoff hunt.
Well, Nate, you're making your points, and Marla, you're making yours, and we talked a little bit before we went on here. But it occurred to me while you two were talking that I'm coming down to this kind of coagulating into this point of view, and that is the Browns aren't far away. Today's offense, I think, was somewhere between disappointing. I don't want to say terrible because they won the game. You're never terrible when you win. But they're not that far off, and here's what I'm talking about. In some of the recent losses, I thought Mayfield has played fairly well to actually well, but he has gotten no help from certain receivers who've dropped balls, and albeit he's misfired a couple of times in bad weather. Today, in a good weather game, he misfired a few times, as you mentioned, and needed to clean that up, especially late in the game. But once again, the whole flow of the game changed on one. It wasn't a drop pass today. It was a fumble. The fumble by Harrison Bryant on the first play of the second half, right when they're coming off a second quarter in which the offense is starting to flow. You can see it. The Jaguars are a bad enough team where they're not going to be able to stop this. And then for Harrison Bryant to come wide open to get a nice ball from midfield and then to fumble it away. You could see it. This was eating at Bryant the whole game, and it did. It ate it the whole game. Bryant, later in the game, you could see him in the huddle when a play didn't get made. He was going like this, and you could tell he was having flashbacks to his phone. And I definitely think that's what was going on. But once that happened, that kind of skewed the rest of the game. And albeit Mayfield's the most important man on the team, and he's got to be the leader, and part of being leader is overcoming these glitches. But after that flow stopped, and it kind of ruined the flow aspect of the game.
Steve, you paid attention to you were talking about the defense before we went live, and what I want to know is it fair to, given who was out, to expect them to do anything but what they did today. But I have another question in that, why doesn't Joe Woods blitz at all or sparingly? I mean, Glennon hadn't played in how many seasons? 4? I mean, you would think that's ripe for trying to rattle him in any possible way. And yet it didn't come. And the one time they were able to get in on him, Olivier Vernon was called for roughing the passer.
George, I think that's a good question by you. Why doesn't Woods blitz more, especially in a game like this? This wasn't the day. I don't think you needed to be conservative, because if you play a little bit of devil may care and get after it and be aggressive, this is one of those games where aggressive mistakes can be made up for because you're playing such a bad team. On the other hand, aggression can maybe make it an early blowout and avoid the kind of product you got today. So, yeah, I agree with you on that, George. As a question, maybe a rhetorical question. Hey, Joe Woods, blitz more. But in terms of whether the Browns defense, with the material it had available to it today, played a decent game, I thought it played about the kind of game I expected. You just don't have enough out there in terms of personnel. And one really important thing that you circle back to, they've played the whole season without Grant Delpit and without Greedy Williams, and that's real money. Not having those two guys, in addition to the two best players, Nate, as you mentioned, not being in there today, and Taki coming off his best game, and this, that, and the other. I thought the defense did plenty enough. And Mayfield, I agree 100% with Mayfield. I'll close with this. Mayfield blamed himself for not doing a better job on offense, and I think that's why the game ended the way it did. Mayfield didn't do what he needed to do on offense for the game to come out as a resounding victory.
Yeah, George, you just said it right there. Make sure everybody heard, but they lost Ronnie Harrison on the first play. He's going to have an MRI tomorrow on the shoulder injury. So, I'd argue he's the third or fourth best player on that defense. So, yeah, there wasn't much. But, this is the thing. Like, the Browns obviously are in the spot where they have a coach who can, get this team, performing up to its potential to a large extent, and they're not wasting their talent. They're winning games. But I think the point is, when you look at a game like this, we're looking at them being 8-3. We're looking at them making a push here to make the playoffs for the first time since 2002, and wondering if they can do anything with it. And I think the bottom line, and Steve, we were kind of spitballing earlier before George hit record. The feeling is that, at least that I have, and I think you're kind of with me on this, but to really capitalize on an opportunity here and to definitely make the playoffs and then do something, Baker just has to be better. I mean, it's just, you have Nick Chubb, who again really saved the day in many respects today. I mean, even at the end when they needed to chew up the clock to ice the game, 3rd and 12, screen Chubb, he gained 13 yards. He's an unbelievable player. Obviously, Jarvis Landry stepped up today. These guys helped compensate for some of those misses by Baker. But you got to, I think, get more out of your quarterback. And he joked about it after the game, about the misses. And it's great that he's able to joke, because that means they're finding a way to win despite it. He also tweeted after the game. He just knows he needs to be better, and I definitely think he does, for them to win, enough to make it in the playoffs in this tight race. It's going to be facing Tennessee, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, of course, the two teams in East Rutherford, New Jersey, who aren't what the other three are. But, and as far as his fifth-year option and all that, I'm at the point where if he's no good, you don't extend him. If he's really good, you extend him, because he's eligible for extension after the season. And if he's somewhere in between, you go with the fifth-year option, and you see, if he can become better under Stefanski because we know he's been in all these systems with all these coaches. So I'm kind of right there in the middle right now with him, and I would do the 5th-year option.
Well, I probably would too. I will say this, Jarvis said repeatedly today that he thinks their best football is still ahead of them. And I don't think he would say that make multiple references to that phrase if he didn't believe that they were going to be better, that they could clean some of this up. So I really do feel like if one of your leaders on offense thinks that your best football is still ahead, that gives you hope that he's on to something.
Marla, one of the points I was trying to finish earlier, I don't know if I did, but it was that Mayfield can clean up these errant throws theoretically, or he would never have been a number 1 overall pick. The guys who have been dropping balls can catch those balls, and that's how they have a chance to not just be better, but maybe even way better than they are right now in offense, which they're going to have to be, I think, because I don't think their defense is more than an average defense if they get everything together. But Marla, as we're talking about Mayfield and Nate and George, but Marla, I know that you are going to relate to this because you covered Vinny Testaverde in 1994-95, and I know that I wasn't covering the Browns on a beat basis then, but I remember Mark Craig, who was for the Repository, would always say what a stand-up guy Testaverde was, and I said, Mark, you say that every week. I'm waiting for the stand-up guy to also be the consistent guy, and he never was, and Vinny was a number 1 overall pick. And my point relative to Mayfield off of that is that Baker, the number 1 overall pick, at some point isn't going to be able to make light of and make jokes about missing a few. He's going to have to hit all of those in some of the important games, all of the hittable ones. He's just last season and this season, he's missed too many. I still suspect he can find it within himself and get coached into making those throws. But right now, we haven't seen it.
And see, he doesn't, from everything I gather from just social media, as much as I hate it, he doesn't even have unilateral support of the fan base. The Browns fan base is 50-50 on this guy right now, as far as what he brings to the team. So,
You think 50-50, George? I would disagree with you. My polling data says that it's more like 63-37.
Okay, fine, fair enough. Hey, we got comments. What do you know? Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about. Especially in this year, there's no way. Is there an accurate way to judge any of this at all? Is there a fair way to judge it? I'm having that problem with another team I cover right now because things have been so out of kilter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, right. There was no off season in person. I understand the question because it is an unprecedented year, but the bottom line is contract decisions loom, and Baker Mayfield's is the biggest for this team. And Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry and Paul Podesta and other key members of the organization are going to have to judge it. So they get paid a lot to do that. I just think there's going to be an interesting decision about him, and we'll see how he plays against some of the better teams here down the stretch. We obviously know that didn't go well early in the season. But yeah, there's a lot to be desired, especially him being a number 1 pick. There's that expectation tied to him, and it's just been a mixed bag. That's all it's been. And now we can say that rain or shine, it's been a mixed bag because, right, I think that the bad weather trilogy has been something that we've all had to kind of hit pause on the Baker Mayfield discussion. So, as Kevin Stefanski said, he's making good plays, and we're winning. And so I'm not discounting some of the great passes he did make, but you want more.
Question, and I don't have the schedule in front of me. Is it home or away next week against Tennessee, correct?
Yeah, it's a national.
So they have a shot at another decent weather game in that respect.
Yes, but not against
a mediocre team.
Yeah.
Not against the Fighting Brables, you know.
They should have
1.5 seconds just to say that I think that 8-3 is a bottom line, but within that bottom line, of course, the anecdotal thought is that it's against a weak schedule. But I give the Browns a ton of credit for winning all those games against the losing teams that they have. And I also give them credit for beating Indianapolis, which has a real good record coming in. Romeo Crennel's Houston Texans, aside from the Browns game, 4-3 with a win over New England. So that's not a terrible win, is it? And I really have a lot of respect for Philadelphia and the program that Peterson runs over there. And to me, the win over Philadelphia, which left Cleveland, I think, in first place in his division, is a real win. And today is your only garbage win, I think.
Fair enough. All right, guys. This has turned into the Baker Mayfield show. On that note, we're going to check out. Next week, it's on to Nashville. Well, not literally, just figuratively. We'll see you then. Until then, I'm George Thomas with Nate Ulrich, Steve Doerschuk, Marla Ridenour. We're out, folks. You have a good night.